And it's time for another Michael Knight Show podcast. This right here is the intro music, so that's how you can tell it's the beginning. Michael Knight, you can follow on Twitter, Mike Talks Big. You can send email, michael@michaelknightshow.com. And thanks a lot for the people that continue to listen to the podcast and share it with other people. You can find this podcast, you can find all the episodes on SoundCloud. I love SoundCloud. I just want to say that it's creates the easiest way for people to get in touch with content that you are publishing out there. So if you're another podcaster, definitely use SoundCloud. I think for the most part, it's free. You can also find the show on Stitcher. All right. So here we go. Today's podcast, I thought it was such a good idea. I was having coffee with a friend this morning, and I said, you know what? I'm going to come into the radio station, and I'm going to hammer out this podcast and make some notes and write a piece on defending ARod. You know, and I do this podcast from the Minneapolis market, and I do want to tie this in with, the Twins a little bit and some of the players here and really just kind of keep it local and interesting. So don't bail on me just because I'm talking about ARod here. But defending ARod, everybody's got an opinion and everybody's got a way to express it now with social media. And half the time now we're buried in our smartphones. If our parents and grandparents were on another planet and they watched what we're doing in this era, it's just unbelievable. This amazing device that was really created by Steve Jobs and how it has changed the way that we all live, how we're buried in technology these days. And what's happening is it's allowing us to come together in groups and find people that we have similar beliefs as and hang out with those people. And part of the reason we do that, it makes us feel better about ourselves. And that happens, it's happening right now with talk radio. You share some beliefs with me, or you wouldn't be listening to this broadcast or podcast. Groupthink is everywhere. And back in 1977 at Stanford University, Ross, Green, and House published a study where they discovered something called the false consensus effect. The false consensus effect is a cognitive bias where a person tends to overestimate how much other people agree with him or her. So basically, it's egocentric. You think you're right, and you think that more people agree with you than disagree with you. The false consensus effect is the bias that leads people to perceive there is a consensus when one does not exist. And the reason they discovered when they did this study that people formulate this false consensus is to increase their own self-esteem. Yeah, it's kind of a natural way of saying, hey, I'm as smart as I thought I was, and I've made a case, and I've got a lot of people that agree with me. And even if I don't have a lot of people that agree with me, I'm just going to assume that there's a consensus of people that believe more the way that I do than not. And what's funny about the way people react to this when they're confronted with the evidence that a consensus does not exist, they get really defensive. They look at other people as being ignorant, uneducated, and defective, which explains all those outbursts on Fox News and MSNBC. What a relief. Whew, I thought it was me. The purpose of introducing the false consensus effect when talking about ARod is to prove the point that just because you think you're right about something doesn't mean that everybody else believes exactly the way that you believe. There's been a consensus built that ARod is a dishonest, selfish cheater with no social skills that took performance-enhancing drugs and lied about it. The consensus is that he should be thrown out of Major League Baseball. The consensus is that he, ARod, should be made the example of based upon morality, not reality. He's not a role model. He's a cheater. He takes these drugs. He's been caught in lies on TV numerous times. They replay them, the audio and video, online and on the air all the time. Here's another reason to dislike him. Signed one of the biggest contracts in sports history, $252 million over 10 years. He's still owed over $100 million on that contract. He'll always have an asterisk by his name. That's all morality stuff. Here's some reality stuff I'm going to lay down on you. 647 home runs, Nearly 2,000 RBIs, a world championship at the Yankees, lifetime batting average 300, on-base percentage 384. He's not an inspirational leader. He's not a great communicator. He's not a saint. He's a superstar that achieved most of his success without the use of performance-enhancing drugs. And you're saying, prove it. I don't have to. The batch is already spoiled. That goes way back to Sammy Sosa and Mark McGwire and all the other players that were busted the first time around. Why should ARod or anybody else care about what people think? And that is the purpose of this whole podcast. That's the sure sign that you've become an adult, when you realize that you can have a different opinion than other people and live with yourself. Who was Michael Jackson? Heath Ledger, Amy Winehouse, Tupac Shakur, all people that could be criticized for their actions. Illegal actions, immoral actions, and lots of other things that could be labeled and fall under the morality category. You may care about morality today, but history has shown that the only thing that matters is reality. When you think of athletes who are really remembered, do you remember Muhammad Ali? Or do you remember the people that, the guy that everybody liked, Joe Frazier? Brett Favre? No saint. Steve Young? Pretty close. Dennis Rodman? Outrageous. Karl Malone? Predictable. I promise you, 10, 15 years from now, when the life of Mariano Rivera comes on TV, on Biography, or the life of Alex Rodriguez, you will be much more inclined to watch the life of Alex Rodriguez because it was much more eventful. Why should ARod care what anybody thinks? The problem is that he does. He's always cared what people thought, and he's always tried to be somebody that he wasn't. If I was ARod's agent, I would tell him that he shouldn't care what anybody thinks. I am a radio personality that does a little bit of writing. It's been listed as my occupation at least a couple of times on the national census. Most people are known for one thing in their life. Do some genealogy work with your kids. At some point in the future, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, and even further into the future will look at your family history on the census, and you'll be known for whatever your employment is right now. And maybe some public service. And that's the reason why people with money want statues, because they want to be remembered for the good things and not the bad things. But the big challenge for most people is to be remembered at all, because no matter how many great things that you do, it's very, very difficult to be remembered forever, like a Babe Ruth. Again, whose life was not about morality. It was about reality. And here's what's funny about jumping into this whole morality thing and being really quick to judge Alex Rodriguez. He's never been in trouble with the law, as far as I know. He doesn't have a drug or alcohol problem outside of PEDs. He comes to play. He will take drugs that are hurtful to his body in order to get back on the field again. He's seeking your approval to the point of lying about it. It's not like he's smoking weed and taking prescription medication and heroin and not showing up for ball games. This guy wants to be the best that ever played the game and is willing to go to any length to do it. Maybe we're part of a group that has put him in a box to make us feel better. The consensus about Alex Rodriguez would then be false. False consensus. Better to be bold than safe. Better to have your work seen and remembered. If not, you've struck out. That's a quote from George Lois, advertising pioneer, and the guy who the TV show Mad Men is based upon. That's your Don Draper. Whether people like you or not, it's not important. Alex Rodriguez will not be forgotten. Don't be part of a false consensus just to make yourself feel better. And don't think I'm defective because I have a different opinion than you do. Alex Rodriguez, regardless of what happens over the next couple of years, which includes his suspension of 200-plus games, if he never plays another game in baseball, while we're all worrying about the morality side of things, the reality is that ARod is a legend. Get off the morality bus. ARod will go down in history as one of the best to ever play the game of baseball. That was true 5 years ago. It's true today, and it'll be true 50 years from now. That's all I got. Michael Knight Show podcast. Follow on Twitter at Mike Talks Big. Listen on SoundCloud and all the other sites that you can find it, or just find me at michaelknightshow.com. That's all I got. Remember, live every day like it's your last. Make some friends and have a blast. Life is short, so play hard, man, and catch me when you can. And one final word of advice. If you steal my material, it's stolen twice. Catch you next time on the Michael Knight Show podcast.